You're listening to the Abolitionist Roundtable, patriotic Black American conservative all-access radio, with your hosts, Del, Phil, and Janice. They're leading the charge in advancing the conservative revolution. Join the conversation at 734-822-1600.
Here back with Chris Levels and Professor George Moss. We are filling in for Dale Marsh and Phil Stargell and what's her name? Janice? And Janice this morning. I left her out. I apologize. So I don't want her looking for me because I did not mention her earlier. But we are on the line with Ralph Epperson from Tucson, Arizona, and we are talking about the Declaratory Act, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and where Obama gets the power to do the things, even though the press and certain segments of the population are screaming that he doesn't have the power to do the things he does. So, Mr. Epperson, we're going to let you continue on and going on to the Constitution so that we can start taking calls and getting some comments going on out here.
Thank you. Okay, let me just end with the last paragraph, just a one quick sentence. In the last paragraph of the Declaration, it says, "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America," meaning once again America, "do publish, and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown." So that's the reason we declared our independence, because of the Declaratory Act of 1766. 10 years later, we're declaring our independence from all of that tyranny. Now, when they wrote the Constitution and issued it in 1787, they had it finished. Anyway, that was 11 years later. They tried to separate the powers because they realized that we didn't want to give all power to government. So they separated it into a legislative, executive, and judicial branches. And each one of those has specifically defined functions inside the Constitution. The legislative is to write the laws, the executive is to enforce the laws, and the judicial is to interpret the laws. Now, they call this checks and balances, which means if one branch of the government gets too powerful, the other two, or either one of the other two, have the power and the authority to stop it. Simply stop it. But they're not stopping it. Notice they're not stopping Barack Obama while he's violating the Constitution, as I'm going to point out to you. They're not doing it, and there's also a very important reason for that. We might not get time to cover that today, but we'll just do what we can, and maybe we'll have time. So now let's go into the Constitution itself, the Constitution of the United States. So there's now a different nation. This is now called the United States. The Constitution of the United States. We, the people of the United States, do establish, etc. Now they're going to go to Article 1, which creates the legislative branch of Congress, Section 1, and Section 1, Article 1, Section 1, says all legislative powers herein granted. So we're now going to grant, which means we're going to list specific powers of Congress. Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the House of Representatives, etc. And then we go to Section 8, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The Congress shall have power. And then they list 17 and only 17 powers. And I'll briefly just run through them, but only briefly. The power to collect taxes, to borrow money, regulate commerce, establish naturalization, coin money, punish counterfeiting, establish post offices, promote science, constitute tribunals, punish piracy, declare war, raise an army, provide for a navy, provide for calling forth the militia, provide for organizing the militia, and then in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Now, these are not numbered, but just to separate them out to make sure that when we refer to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, we're reading the 17th power delegated to Congress. Now, just go through those. Did you see or hear anything about the power to fund stem cell research?
No.
Did you hear? Huh?
No.
No. Did you hear anything about funding space efforts and building space telescopes and going to the moon?
No.
How could our founding fathers have delegated those powers? They would have not have known what stem cell research was. They would have never imagined that we could orbit things and go to the moon. Where did they delegate the powers to do that? But Congress is doing that. Why? Because of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. And this is the most incredible thing that I found in my research of 50-some years. Listen to this, America. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. Now, we're not finished, but let's just stop right there. Congress shall have the delegated power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. Now, in 1766, when King George used those same words, he was called a tyrant. That was the power to legislate in all, meaning all cases. And then when we declared our independence, we said, wait a minute, King George, you've got the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, and we're calling that tyranny, absolute tyranny. And now we're going to give it to Congress. Why? Why would they do that? And I cannot find an answer except the one I'm going to give you. No one that I know of has even talked about this. Our congressmen and senators don't talk about this. They were given absolute tyrannical power in Congress in one of the 17 statements of declared powers, the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. This is incredible. In other words, Barack Obama's got the power. It's in the Constitution. And our congressmen and our senators and our Supreme Court know they've got this power. The only people who don't know they've got the power is we, the dummies. We don't know this until little Ralphie Epperson found it several years ago and is making it public. We just gave our Congress and our senators the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, absolute tyrannical power. That's why Barack Obama can issue law, create law, amend law, change law, exempt law, whatever it is. He's got the power. It's under the Constitution.
Okay.
Now, that is incriminating, but there's no one talking about it. And strangely enough, there's been like 7 debates of the Republican Party, the candidates running, and not one of them has ever had to answer, what does it mean, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever? But I'm telling you, those 17 candidates, wherever they are, there were 11 or 12, wherever, they know they've got the power, and they're not talking about it until Ralph Epperson is.
I tell you what, before we go to break, I want to give Professor Moss a chance to ask you a question here. And go ahead, George.
Yeah, I want to say that I see it a little bit differently than that. I think that the Constitution is a restriction of power. The division of power you talked about in terms of Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, this division of power, putting the legislative power under the Article 1, and even in that, separating it into 2 bicameral branches of the Congress, where there be responsibilities underneath the legislative body. You'd have some power in the House, and then the other power in the Senate, and you were separating it in order to give some power to the state. And my point, the point I'm trying to make here.
That's where we're going with this. We're going to read the 10th Amendment.
Okay, I do want to say this. I think that what you have in the Constitution, I just want to see if you agree with this, that it is a prohibition of power. It is not to allow power to be expanded. It's trying to restrict power in every aspect of the Constitution. Article 1, 2, and 3.
Why did they give them the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever then?
But you're talking about Article 1, Section 8, where you said that there is the enumeration of power. Would you say that the enumeration of power is restriction because you have the enumeration, meaning that it's delegated?
Yes, correct. The power to legislate in all cases whatsoever is delegated,
okay,
which means it's one of the 17 delegated powers.
Okay.
The power to write any law you want to, fund stem cell research, tax us for foreign aid, give away our money, fund government spending and education, and for whatever you want. You've got the power. It's in the Constitution. It's one of the 17 delegated powers, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. That's the third time we've seen those exact same words in the Declaratory Act, in the Declaration, and now in the Constitution. And by the way, when they're talking about Congress, the Congress means both the House and the Senate. So Congress, in this case, means both houses. That's what it says back in the beginning of Article 1, Section 8.
Let me ask you.
They just gave total unlimited power to Congress. They've got the power. That means Barack Obama can do exactly what he's doing today. He can write law, amend law, but we just said Article 2 was to create the executive branch. The executive branch cannot write law, amend law, change law, exempt law, but that's what Barack Obama's doing because Barack Obama knows he's got the power under of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, and that's why they can fund stem cell research. We can take our tax money to go to the moon. We can fund education. We can fund whatever you jolly well want. This is the problem in America. They've got the power, and they know they've got the power. We don't know they've got the power.
The Abolitionist Roundtable invites the Wham Talk 1600 listeners to continue the roundtable discussions by mailing correspondence to Art of Michigan, Post Office Box 135, Garden City, Michigan, 48135.
Or follow Phil, Del, and Janice at artofmichigan.com. You can also send emails to artofmichigan@hotmail.com. And most of all, continue to listen every Saturday and tell a friend.